not be for you as much as those that didn't come this afternoon, and that would be, "Oh, come, let us adore him." Yeah, I'm glad that you did. Matthew chapter 2, and I want to make sure and give a preface or a disclaimer to this afternoon's message, that this message is not necessarily directed at you, but as a general message. So I thought I maybe ought to put a disclaimer on some of the things that I'm going to say this afternoon, because I think it's so fitting with the way some have looked at the services today. I've been in so many conversations about the time of the services, whether we have the services, even more so for next year. Because Christmas falls on Christmas Day. It always falls on Christmas Day. Yeah, aren't you glad you came to get that great truth? Christmas next year falls on Christmas Day. Write that on your calendar so you don't get confused. Sunday, Christmas falls on Sunday, so even more so next year. I've titled the message this afternoon, "As Troubled as Herod." As troubled as Herod. When I wrote these thoughts down, I really wasn't thinking of all the different discussions I'd have with people about being here in church in the afternoon. So some of you are as troubled as Herod is about being here today. And so that's the purpose for the preface and the disclaimer. As troubled as Herod. Matthew chapter 2, let's pray together. Lord, thank you for this time we can be together. And I don't know that I have anybody in mind when it comes to this message, but yet on the other hand, there are some Christians and some people that are troubled at the news of your birth. We as Christians are not. Sometimes Christians that get backslidden are. But I pray that you'll help us to determine whether we fall into the category as being as troubled as Herod or if we're far from it. And so I pray that you'll use these thoughts in the next little while. We'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. Matthew chapter 2. We'll not read the whole chapter because I think you know enough about it that we'll go verse by verse, but we'll start and I'll highlight some verses. As troubled as Herod. For most, as we heard this morning, that this tidings would be to all people, and then we need to make it personal. But that was the good news, and we know that Jesus came into the world, that he so loved the world. But there were some in the days of Herod that were troubled at the presence of Jesus and at the birth of Jesus, probably just as they are today. And so Herod was one that gave an order that you're aware of to kill these newborn children because of the news that he had heard. So we find that Herod was very troubled. So look if you're at Matthew chapter 2 and verse 1. Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east, and we are come to worship him. So many messages that I preached through the years, messages and applications. His star, that's interesting. We have seen his star, so they were looking for it. And just a lot of little different interesting thoughts that we can give that will continue to do so each year. But verse 3, when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him, as troubled as Herod. I got to thinking about some of the characteristics of Herod, and as you read through this story and you see that there are some people that fall into the category as being as troubled as Herod. As I mentioned in my prayer, that you may have picked up on. Usually it's lost people that are troubled at the things of the Lord, but sometimes Christians who get in a backslidden condition can be troubled at the things of the Lord. So I see, first of all, as we go through some of these characteristics of Herod, and hopefully you don't find yourself being as troubled as Herod was, but we find, first of all, that Herod was distressed at the presence of Jesus. And so it says here that when he heard these things that Jesus was born, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And that's why I had to give the preface and the disclaimer that some of you were very troubled that happened to come to church this afternoon. And I say that with tongue in cheek. The truth is, we all know and we all understand that, and that's why you're here, that in your faithfulness, and I'm not saying that trying to come from a back door, trying to be silly or sarcastic, and the comments and the conversations that we have had, that I have had with different people, have kind of been tongue-in-cheek, not totally tongue-in-cheek. But yeah, yesterday was a tiring day, a fun day, but you get to the end of the day, and I'm usually on Saturday nights, I'm getting geared up towards Sunday, and I just begin to get in a different mode as far as my thinking, and just slowing down and just asking the Lord to just work throughout Sunday. And there's just a different attitude on Saturday nights and getting ready for church. It was a little bit more difficult last night because of it just being Christmas Day and the overeating, and like I'd mentioned, going to bed way too late on Friday night, getting up way too early on Saturday morning, and then you're tired throughout the day and you're overeating throughout the day, but you're playing games. I don't even know what they call that thing. What is that game that Keegan got that? The virtual reality, they got a virtual reality set and a game center or whatever it is, and they hooked it up to our TV, and you can put those headphones on, or not headphones, those eyeglasses and everything, whatever they are, and you call them, and you can also hook it up to your television so that you can see what they're seeing through those glasses, or that little hood, or whatever you call it. Well, we were watching some of these things, some of the different games, and one is a roller coaster, and I kept saying, because they asked me, said, "Dad, you got to do this. Grandpa, you need to do this." And I said, "Sure." And so, but they said, "You need to do the roller coaster." And I said, "Well, I mean, there's nothing to it. I mean, but I'm watching on the TV screen." And I said, "It doesn't look to me like you're doing anything. You're just going over the rails. It doesn't look like you're doing anything." "Oh no, you need to try it with these goggles on." And so I put those crazy goggles on, and they turned that thing on, and I kept telling myself, "You're standing in your living room. Don't embarrass yourself." So I'm just standing there nonchalant, and that thing took off, and I found myself moving and doing motions, and I got to laughing at myself, and then I'm conscious, and I'm thinking, they're all watching me, and I can hear them. I'm up here, and I'm moving and swaying, and I said, I could feel myself, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? You're not supposed to be doing this. And so then I had to reposition my feet, because I said, I'm going to fall down if I'm not careful. So I had to reposition my feet. Y'all, I couldn't believe it, but I got motion sick. I really did. I got motion sick. I had to take a Dramamine before I went to bed because I was about to get sick. And it helped. We started bringing it in. I'm about to get sick talking about it even right now. We brought it up this afternoon, and I told him, I said, I'm serious. I just thinking about that and watching everything on that screen. I said, I'm about to get sick thinking about it. And so we had fun. So it's not a good thing when you're normally slowing down and getting your heart prepared on a Saturday night to come to church on a Sunday morning like we normally do, to fight motion motion sickness that happened off of a dumb goggle set and a TV screen. And so, and you did the same thing. You probably got something that was a game, or you got a new tool, or you got something, and the day just, boy, as the day went on, it just kept getting later and later, and then back of your mind, you're thinking, we got church in the morning, but we got to get our clothes out, we got to get this, we got to do some wash, you got to make sure everything is in order if you're anything like our household on a Saturday night. But we had all these other different things going on with Christmas. So you probably went to bed a little too late also. And you were tired, but yet the truth is, our real love for the Lord knows we're supposed to be in church. And if the church doors are open, you're going to be here. That's why you are here, because you do love the Lord. And I say that with all seriousness. But the truth is, there are some people that live their Christian life that the things of the Lord just distress them a little bit, troubles them. They just don't like hard preaching. And when it comes to talking about the things of God, they're just some Christians. I mean, they're on their way to heaven. They've got their life insurance ticket. But when it comes to really being serious about the things of the Lord, they just don't want to get too serious. And you get to talking about the things of God, it just distresses them just a little bit too much. And it troubled Herod at the news of the presence of Jesus. Not only that, but these people that find themselves troubled at the presence of Jesus in Matthew 2 and verse 4, when he had gathered all the chief priests and the scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born. You know, I've noticed people that get away from God, and sometimes in marriages, you'll see a husband or a wife get away from God. It's amazing how demanding they get on everybody else around them. And Herod was just so demanding, and he wanted to know where Jesus was. You tell me, you go find out, and you find out right away. You know what? If you're one of those kind of people that are just so demanding to everybody around you, you ought to slow down a little bit and ask yourself, are you really a pleasant type of a person to be around, or are you so stressed out about the things of God that I mean, you just make it uncomfortable for everybody else around you, because you're so demanding, you're so bossy, and everybody has to fit into your mode and into everything that you're doing, into your life, but you really never want to fit into everybody else's life. It's all about you and your selfishness. And I'm not saying you're that way, but I mean, that we see that Herod was that way. Herod was very demanding to those that were around him. He was distressed at the presence of Jesus. He was demanding to those who were around him. Look, if you would, at verse 8. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, go search diligently for the young child, and when you have found him, bring me word again that I may come and worship him. That verse always bothers me every time I read it. And I don't have it written in this Bible, but I want to circle that part of that verse and write out to the side, liar. Liar. He didn't want to worship the devil. That's what worshiping the devil. Yeah, he didn't want to worship the Lord. And so there's some people, when they get troubled at the presence of the things of God and the presence of Christ, they become very demanding. And it amazes me, maybe I should say it doesn't amaze me, the longer you pastor, how deceptive some people can live. Come to church and live this good life, but you got to keep your everyday living life kind of separate from everybody else, because you know that you're living a double standard and a double life. And you come to church because you're supposed to. Maybe you come to church because you feel like mom and dad are being demanding, because you just don't want, being around the presence of Jesus and being around the presence of singing and preaching and congregation and all of that. It just stresses me out. And to go in there and hear the preacher preach it, and it's none of his business, the kind of life that I live. And so you come to church and you sing your church songs, and you go your own little direction, and you listen to your worldly songs and sing your worldly songs, and you find yourself being so deceptive. And so many times people that live a deceptive kind of a lifestyle, they become a pretty good liar themselves. because they got to cover all of their bases, and they got to say things that they really don't mean, and that aren't in their heart, because if mom and dad or somebody else find out about it. And so we got to be real deceptive, and we got to make sure that we're real secretive when we talk to our friends, and because we don't want anybody else to know what we're going to be doing next week or what we did last week, and we can't let anybody be aware of that. Yeah, how deceptive of a life are you living lately? You kind of have to ask yourself that from time to time. And so he was deceptive. Go find out where he is. I want to worship him. No, you don't. You don't want to worship him. I understand young people. I understand people that just fall short. I understand that. But the thing that gets me is when some people become so deceptive in their life, and it almost becomes a game, and they begin to mock the things of God because they're so deceptive, and they live like the devil when they aren't around God's people and aren't around the preacher. And then when they come to church, and sometimes somebody will say something that's a spiritual statement or a spiritual thought, and then you see the little chuckle, you see the mockery, you see the people that are just, because they're trying to be cool with all of their other friends. I guarantee if that is happening to you, you're living a deceptive life behind the scenes, and you're as troubled as Herod is or was. And so distressed at his presence, very demanding, living a very deceptive life. And then Matthew 2 and verse 13 as we continue through the story. When they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother and flee into Egypt, and be there until I bring thee word. For Herod will seek the child to destroy him. Look at verse 16. Then Herod, when he saw that he was mocked of the wise men, was exceeding wroth, and sent forth and slew all the children that were in Bethlehem and in all the coasts thereof, and from 2 years old and under, according to the time which he had diligently inquired of the wise men. Some people, they just don't mind taking somebody else down, being destructive in their words, being destructive in their actions. And boy, we see that with Herod here. He was distressed at the presence of Jesus, very demanding, very deceptive in the way that he was living, claimed he wanted to worship Jesus, and so much so that he was willing to hurt people that were around him. I don't understand that mentality. You got to be careful, because I understand we live in a bigger town. We hear Fort Wayne news, and you got to be careful making reference to some of these stories that you hear. But we heard of a little 8 or 9 year old boy that died in the last few days, and the circumstances by which that little boy died. I just sit and I just shake my head. I just said, how in the world can parents treat a child in that way? How far does a mind have to go in order to have that kind of a mentality that you can be so destructive and to those that are around you? Could you imagine the type of mentality that Herod had, that he was so against the things of God that he was willing to be destructive and hurtful to those who are around him, to the point of saying, kill them all of them that are 2 years of age and younger, just kill them. That is a destructive spirit and a destructive attitude. You know what? Sometimes, kiddos, if you come home, teenagers, and you're yelling, screaming, and because you're living a deceptive life, you're a little bit distressed at the presence and the conversation of the things of church, and you come home because you're living a deceitful life, and you come home and mom and daddy question you about where you've been and who you've been with and what did you do, and all of a sudden you start screaming and yelling and carrying on and creating a destructive atmosphere atmosphere, and before you know it, you've said ugly things to a mom or a dad, and you've spouted off, and you see, if you aren't careful, you become very destructive in your own personality and your own attitude towards those people that are around you. Some of the people that are the dearest and the best people to you, and yet you lose it to the point to where you're okay to destroy everybody else around you. Why? To cover up your deceptive lifestyle and your deceiving lifestyle, and everybody better fall in order, and you're demanding, and you get to the point where you live a very destructive lifestyle. But one thing you got to keep in mind, as you keep reading through this story and you look at some of the characteristics that troubled Herod, that led to him being as troubled as he was. Matthew chapter 2 and verse 19 says, "But when Herod was dead, behold, an angel of the Lord appeareth in a dream to Joseph in Egypt." Basically say, y'all, I'm going back now because Herod has died. And then, and so I want to remind you, if the things of the Lord distress you, troubled about the things of God, and you become very demanding to those that are around you, you live a deceptive lifestyle, so demanding that the relationships, your spirit is a destructive kind of a spirit and an attitude. Let me remind you, one of these days you're going to die. And you're going to stand before the Lord in judgment. And boy, I want to remind you that don't allow yourself to be as troubled as Herod was, because we're all going to give an account. And so we need to keep a sweet spirit and a right kind of spirit toward the things of God as we live for the Lord. And don't allow yourself to be as troubled as Herod was. That's why when you come to church, enjoy it. Okay, you see why I wanted to give my preface or my disclaimer. Come and enjoy it. And enjoy the things of God. Don't shun the presence of God and the conversation of the things of the Lord. Don't live a deceptive lifestyle. It'll hurt your spirit. It'll hurt your attitude. Before you know it, you're very demanding. You're very destructive. And if you aren't careful, you know, it just seemed like in the last month we've heard of way too many young people that have died. Young people have sat in this auditorium. And don't just take for granted that you're going to live to be 60, 70, 80 years old. You don't always know that. So I would encourage you to keep your attitude in check, your spirit in check, and don't allow the devil to get you to the point where you are as troubled as Herod was. Well, those are my thoughts. Let's have a word. Thank you for the afternoon. I pray that as we go back to another Christmas story and think about